Hi everybody, it's Mark here. I thought I'd come on today and encourage those of you that have never tried a Tarot de Marseille style deck. I want to give you some steps to make the process easier if you wanted to try out that kind of deck. So to begin with, I thought I'd show you a selection of some of the Tarot de Marseille decks that I have. I don't have a lot of them, but the ones I have I really love, and that's also the key to learning Tarot de Marseille, just like an RWS or a Thoth-based deck, or any tarot deck. You have to love the imagery, and if you love the imagery, that will spur you on to learn how to go about using the deck. So the deck that got me into Tarot de Marseille is this indie deck, the Marshmallow Marseille. It comes in this great box. It's got this jazz happening on the back. Not really a plus for me. But what I really liked about it is the coloration. There's a lot of pinks and greens, but just how cute the characters are. I mean, and this is based on a proper deck. I forget which one. It was an Italian deck. I think it's the Trieste or something like that. But in any case, it is based on an actual deck. But when you can make a death card and look this cute, you got something going there. So they kind of remind me of like little Peanuts characters, Charlie Brown. As if they were tarot deck was shrunk down and made to look like that. Best moon card in any deck ever. Look at that. It's just so great, the coloration. So anyway, that's what attracted me back to the Tarot de Marseille. I just thought, I've got to learn how to use this deck. Of course, I didn't show you it, and then of course it has the standard Pippish stuff that was always sort of that barrier for a lot of us in learning Marseille. So after working with that for quite a while, that's where I really learned how to sort of read this style deck again. I got my hands on the Jean Noblet. I've shown this deck before at various times. This is what I would call my most traditional Marseille. It's really, really great. Great backs, squared edges, just like the original tarot decks. It's very hard on the hands sometimes when you're shuffling because those are pointy edges. But in any case, I love this because it is standard, traditional imagery, but with a little cheekiness, literally, thrown in to the cards. I mean, look at this hangman. He's sticking out his tongue at you, waving his hands. So sometimes there's interesting things going on in some of these cards. But again, it is a good representation of a tarot deck of the time, and it hasn't been changed other than bumped up with the colorization and that type of thing. So I really like that deck. It's great for that directionality that I'm always talking about. People are looking in all kinds of directions, as I always like to point out, is good for me in reading a tarot deck. So that's another one that you could choose if that would appeal to you more. This one is the Tarot Classic, and Stuart Kaplan came out with this at US Games back in the early 70s, just when he was reintroducing the RWS deck that we all know. He also put out this Tarot de Marseille deck. And it's also based on, I think it's a Swiss Tarot de Marseille. It's got big, bold, bright colors. It's almost as if a child has gotten into the crayon box and really gone at a tarot deck. But what I do like about this deck, although I don't use it that often, but the faces are very expressional, have very readable expressions, and they're quite big, they're quite large. So you could really see what is going on in the image and on the face of the characters. So that's another choice. I think you would only be able to get that on eBay or something. It is vintage. Another one I like, Le Tarot de Marseille. This is from Fournier. This is the vintage version. There is a version you can get off Amazon, like a current version, but the colors aren't as nice. I find that's often true. The vintage versions are almost always superior in terms of color. So what's different about this deck, again, it's a standard Tarot de Marseille, but they've colored in the backgrounds. It's very, very vibrant. So it's not just those 4 or 5 colors you sometimes see in this type of tarot deck. So it's really quite beautiful to look at, and that might appeal to you and get you going. Look at the star card. That is so great. And it's not just the majors. All of the pips, the courts, they are all colored as well. And what's nice about the deck is the suits have a color of its own. So we have a spring green for the wands, we have a cool wintry blue for the swords, we have a hot summery pink for the cups, and we have maybe an autumnal yellowy green gold for the coins. And that's actually my seasonal associations with each of the suits too. I know that's not everyone's, but that is mine. So that's a really great deck as well. So that should give you some idea of the choices you have out there. I think before I started looking into Tarot de Marseille, I would see those standard decks online, and they all kind of looked the same, and they weren't very spectacular in color, and you know, there wasn't much of a pool. But you can see you have lots of choice. And so, how do you read the pips in Tarot de Marseille? Once you've figured out you like a deck and you'd like to learn how to read the pips, because frankly, the Tarot de Marseille is not that difficult a transition. You can move all of the RWS meanings for the majors and all the RWS meanings for the courts over to your Marseille readings, no problem. In fact, you just have the same meanings, but the extra bonus of that directionality that I like. So we get to the pips, and you have to sit down or go online and figure out what each of the suit qualities mean for you and what each of the numbers mean for you. In other words, some keywords for wands, some keywords for cups, some keywords for the number 3, some keywords for the number 4. And then you have these 2 lists, and then when one of those pips come up in the reading, you just pull the suit and the number and you put them together. And the great thing about this is you're not trapped with the image on the RWS, which shows you something very specific going on. There's a lot of wiggle room when you just have a meaning for a suit and a meaning for a number, and you get to decide how that's going to play out. So I'll just read to you, and then I'll show you my list of what I use when I do the Marseille. I created this list, but it's from known sources, you know, just the way you learn tarot. You take a bit here, you take a bit there. So for me, wands are energy, passion, hobbies, projects, work, action, and the gut instinct. Cups are emotion, love, home, friends, family, and spirituality. Swords are thoughts, words, worries, and conflict. I just realized the word is in the word sword. Anyway, and coins are well-being, finances, health, and the material. So I'll just show you that, and you can pause that, and you can see my full list there. And then the numbers. And again, I didn't go off the rails with the numbers. These meanings you can pretty much find anywhere. But I do cherry pick the ones that seem the most appropriate for my thinking. So for aces, it's potential, beginnings, seeds. The twos are a polarity, a choice, a decision, or a stalemate. Threes are creation, growth, or just first steps within that suit, first steps taken. Fours are stability, rigidity, and structure. Fives are crisis, change, and a destabilizing influence and conflict as well. So there's my 1 to 5 list if you want to take a look at that. Feel free to use these. You don't have to quote me. Anyway, so here are my 6 to 10s. Harmony, interconnection, beauty, balance. The 7s are, it's a test, there's a risk, there's a certain amount of faith needed, there's a breakthrough possible, an assessment, and there's an imagining of sorts. 8s are progress, perfection, mastering, movement, and power. 9s are intensity, fulfillment, and perseverance. And 10s are an excess, an end, and a transition. So there's my 6 through 10. And you'll find as you use these and you try to remember these keywords, it's not that difficult because you can actually reference those RWS images that you know so well. So for instance, if we were looking at the, let's say we just pulled the 2s from the RWS deck, we could see polarity, choice, decisions, and stalemates possibly going on in these cards. So that can be just sort of a memory key, a mnemonic for you. In terms of the 8s, which is about progress and movement, that type of thing that I listed before. Got the 8 of Wands, is very easy to see there. The progress when you move on from what you've been doing. Here is the lack of movement and the need for progress. And then here's the progress when you work at something. You do your 10,000 hours and then you become a master at it. And so again, you don't have to even throw out the pips in terms of learning the Tarot de Marseille. If your keywords can reflect the pips as you know them, go for it. But these numbers also stand alone just as number meanings, separate from the RWS. So now you're ready to start reading with your Tarot de Marseille deck. So Yoav Ben Dov had suggested in his book that start with just the majors. Just start reading the majors. And in that way, you can get used to certainly the directionality in the cards and the slight variations that might occur in a Tarot de Marseille major as opposed to the RWS. For example, we have my preferred lovers where there's a choice going on as opposed to playing out in the Garden of Eden. And again, the courts. So anyways, you read the majors first, so you learn how to get comfortable with them. Then he suggests you add the courts. And again, these are 2 areas of RWS that you're already really familiar with. So now you've got a tarot pack that has the majors and the courts together. So it's getting to be a more sizable deck. And he says, so you read those and you get comfortable with that. And then he suggests, I don't know if I can find them quickly here, but he suggests, here's one of them. Then you add the aces, because the aces are the same basically in the RWS and in the Marseille. It's just the beginning, this power of that suit. So now you'll have added them. So now you've got a nice chunk of a tarot deck. So work with that for a while, and then you can go about adding these pips later. Once you get to that point, I suggest you to ease into using the pips, because there's nothing worse than when you're first learning Tarot de Marseille and you put down 3 cards and they're all pips. There's no people, there's no nothing. You just sort of sit there and just think, objects in front of me, what do they mean? So what I suggest is, if you ask a question, and I actually like to do this even now, even though I can read a full deck, I think this is a great way to get a reading, even if it's an RWS deck. And that is split out your majors from your courts and then from your pips. So you have 3 piles that you're going to shuffle. So you ask your question, and the first card is going to be, let's say you want to know how is the job interview going to go, kind of thing. So you pick something from the first pile and it's a major. So okay, so you're thinking there's a big choice involved, going from something old to something new, that sort of coloring what would be happening in this job interview. So now you pick something from just the courts, and oh, you've got the King of Cups. So this looks like the person who's going to interview you is very psychological in their demeanor, very diplomatic, kind, a good listener. I mean, look at these ear flaps. So that gives you another piece of information. And then for the last bit of information, you would just pick one of the pips, one of the minors, and I happen to get an ace in the minors. And so that's going to go great, your job interview. It's a brand new start. You're going to be very excited about it. So in fact, this deck I just pulled from, I keep this deck separated, majors, courts, minors, at all times, in case I feel like that's a reading I want to get. Okay, so just to close out now, if you're still not ready to get your Marseille deck, I have 2 interim decks that are more RWS based that can get you comfortable in reading a Marseille. And the first one is the Sheridan Douglas, which I think most people know I really like. It's one of my favorites. And in fact, when I had switched from RWS to learn Marseille for about 6 months there, this was a deck I used to switch back from Marseille to RWS. And the reason it was such a good deck to transition back to RWS is that it maintains Marseille majors. So we've got the twins in the garden under the sun, that's very Marseille. We've got the skeleton with the scythe and the heads below, very Marseille. A Marseille kind of high priestess, papess in fact here, that's in fact a Marseille term. We've got the lovers with the choice again. Even the courts have more of a Marseille feel to them than the RW courts as we know it. But this deck does, so you're going to be really comfortable with these cards, has some pippish action happening in it, but not so pippish that you're just staring at 10 sticks. There is something going on in this 10 of Wands. Here's the 3 of Wands. Basically, I guess it's the sail mass of the 3 wands, but you know, very, very different. Here's the 6 of Wands. So we've got the wreath from the victory, in case you have trouble remembering what the card means. Here we have an interesting 4 of Wands, these different tools of creativity. This 3 of Swords is quite pippish, and even something like this. So there you're sort of moving towards pips without having to just rely on just 3 objects in front of you. That's why it's a good transition deck to Marseille from RWS. But, you know, take heart, there's a lot of very RWS imagery in the pips here, just shown slightly differently. It's not all just pip action, which again makes it easier for you to make that transition. Now, once you get the Sheridan Douglas under your belt and you're comfortable with that, here's a deck that I consider Marseille. It's the Tarot de Ozarks. There's no box. This is just make playing cards box. And the creator herself says it's not a Marseille deck, but I do beg to differ. So just to show you a few of the majors, here we got the Twins, Under the Sun. By the way, this is my favorite Marseille-ish deck in terms of art. I am just blown away by the art in this deck. So here we have our skeleton with the heads and the scythe. Here we have our lovers making a decision. There's like our Marseille devil, close to the RWS, but here's more of a magician that is more Marseille, and we know it. The courts are very Marseille with their directionality, like these cards. This is very, very Marseille, especially this one. This is in Marseille. He has a coin, and there's one on the ground as well. But the reason she says it's not a Marseille is because she gives you some more in the pips than you would get in a normal Marseille. I mean, I can only think that's why she says it's not a Marseille. So we have nobody wants to see the Five of Swords, and this is very much a Marseille Five of Swords. This is how they would sit on the card. But she's made this sword blood-tipped, running with blood here, in this black hole of ill intent in the middle. So you get an emotion off the card. Same with the dreaded Nine of Swords. It's very, very dark. We've got these jangly things going on here, these little sparks of perhaps anxiety in the card. So there's enough there that you can get an idea. Here's the Five of Cups. So something is destabilizing because it's a 5, as I mentioned. And right away we see here's the big green cup. It's a different color, it's a different size, etc. Here's a 7 of Cups. So that's that dreamy cup. And there's still some fantasy, cloudy, kind of up in your head vibe going on in the card. So, and then of course she has very nice sort of happier cards. It's not all dark gloom and doom. It just depends on the card itself. There's a beautiful 7 of coins. Anyway, so the artwork is amazing. The pips aren't boring. So that would be another good step after the Sheridan Douglas, heading towards the Marseille. So that's basically all I have to say on that. I hope that's been helpful to you, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Take care.